Hello, this is Mr. Ferreira, and will be taking you through the next part of the attachment course, looking specifically at animals in understanding attachment behavior and the Harlow research. Now, this is an exciting part of the course because there's really so much kind of going on in terms of Harlow. People love his rhesus monkeys and the research that he does, and it's definitely kind of raises lots of questions, gives us lots of answers, and certainly something I think you will enjoy. Now, firstly, we also noticed that Harlow's research that I'm focusing on is the published in 1958 one, and we see here that it says here demonstrated that contact comfort is more important than food. And of course, this becomes quite an important aspect of the course, saying contact comfort, saying the need or the kind of responding to comfort is more important than food, and especially as we move into the next topic where we do consider kind of why do we form attachments, this is going to become quite important. So he worked with rhesus monkeys, and he's trying to do something similar to Lorenz. He's trying to figure out, is there something about kind of animal behavior that helps us understand what is going on with human behavior. So what we can tell you about Harlow is that he observed newborn baby monkeys that were kept alone and reared in a cage. And actually, apparently it was a bit of an accident that he worked with rhesus monkeys. He didn't have any other monkeys to work with. And also kind of when talking to the people who kind of looked after the animals, he kind of noticed that they clung to the blanket that they had in their cage when the cages were cleaned. And so from this, he becomes really important in terms of our understanding of contact comfort. So they were kept usually in a bare cage, and many of them died. And if they did survive, they typically had that cloth to kind of help them kind of deal with the stress of being in the cage. Now, there we have a YouTube link for you to watch, and I'll put the link on the Google Classroom for us, and it's just showing you a bit of Harlow studies that we can have a look at. It's black and white footage, and certainly very interesting to kind of see what's happening. There's also a documentary called Monkey Love, and I do have access to this, and I may kind of put that up for you as well. It's definitely not worth searching for on Google because you might get some strange results for Monkey Love, but it kind of looks at kind of Harlow kind of near the end of his career and in terms of kind of the controversy that surrounded him. But hopefully from that short video you'll be able to see briefly what we're talking about in terms of Harlow and his monkeys. So let's look specifically at the part of the course that we need to have a look at. So he wanted to test this idea that a soft object kind of gave some kind of function to the baby, and kind of the baby responded in some way that was kind of very positive. And so he reared 8 baby monkeys with 2 wire model mothers. Okay, and you can see from the video previously kind of what those models kind of looked like. We had one condition, so that is 4 of the monkeys. We find that the milk was dispensed by the plain wire mother. So there is this idea that it's still getting food, but it's coming from this kind of wire mother. He kind of argued that mother was very consistent. It never kind of shouted, it never kind of hurt the baby or anything. It just simply gave the baby food. However, in the second condition, so the other 4 monkeys, we see that milk was dispensed from a cloth-covered monkey. So we have basically a kind of a reference where there's one mother that's kind of soft and comfortable, and the other one where it's just kind of giving milk but not comfortable at all. And we see that we have quite a long study which is kind of having a look at these baby monkeys, 165 days, and also we find that he's kind of measuring how much time they spent on the different mothers. Okay, so we've got a comparison between the cloth and the wire, and in those particular situations. He also ran an experiment where he kind of brought this mechanical bear into the cage to frighten the baby monkey, and he wanted to kind of see what would happen to the monkey at that particular stage. Now, of course, we can look at this. This is 1958. We can look at this and say, okay, I mean, that's really quite cruel, scaring animals, kind of hurting animals, potentially animals that died and things like that. But however, we need to consider that without this type of research, potentially we wouldn't be able to find the things out that we had, and now it would be unethical for me to run this research because it's already been run before. So what did he find? Okay, so we find quite specifically that the baby monkeys cuddled the soft object in preference to the wire one. So in other words, they sought comfort from the cloth. Okay, and it didn't matter whether it dispensed milk or not. Okay, and certainly when they were frightened, they ran to the contact comfort. Now, another way that you can run this particular experiment is to have one baby mother that has milk and the other baby mother that has no milk but comfort, and we can see the comparison between the two. And you certainly can see this in some of the videos that you can look at later. The other part of the findings, we make specific reference to contact comfort, and he kind of said that this contact comfort was more important to the monkeys than food. Okay, so therefore we have a direct comparison. We have one idea that the attachment is formed by the object that gives the baby food, or attachment is formed by the object that gives the baby comfort, and he was quite clearly showing that comfort was more important than food. Okay, and so we can see kind of two kind of pictures here showing you kind of what those monkeys look like. We see specifically this one here, even the monkey kind of bending over and feeding from the wire monkey with food on it, but kind of choosing to spend time, and we see down here, choosing to spend time with the comfort monkey rather than anything else. And so there's another YouTube link for you to follow, in which you can watch kind of Harlow's research. Definitely worth having a look at, and there's some color footage as well to kind of see the comparison between the two. Now, certainly at this stage, I do ask you to consider what is both good and bad for this particular research, and if anyone can spot something that potentially could be used to be a criticism of this particular research. So think about it, maybe pause the video. Can you see something that potentially would worry you about consistency within the experiments? Okay, hopefully you figured it out. We see that one monkey has this square face and the other monkey has this round face, kind of more kind of monkey-like. And people did criticize Harlow for this, saying that actually it was almost as if the monkey that was giving food was not meant to be kind of friendly in the first place. And Harlow did have a reason for this, but we see in later footage that he did change this and it made no difference whether it was the square-faced monkey or the round-faced monkey. The baby monkeys always consistently spent more time on the contact comfort wire monkey. So that's the first part that we need to consider, this idea that Harlow is showing us that contact comfort. So think about this in terms of early childhood attachment, kind of having contact, kind of touching the mother. Kind of now we talk about things like skin to skin, and they kind of encourage dads to have the same type of experience with their babies. That comfort that comes from being in contact with something else is incredibly important. Now we move on to another aspect of his research, and this is just for us to kind of help us look at kind of what happens to kind of babies as they grow up, and is that early attachment quite important? And so I'm going to use this phrase maternally deprived. Okay, and we'll get into more detail in another part of the course. So maternally deprived, maternally being mother, deprived being taken away. So this is some thing where they kind of had a mother and they were deprived of it. Okay, and so maybe you want to think about, okay, would there be some permanent effect on these monkeys? Would we eventually be able to just kind of integrate them back into kind of a monkey troop as normal? And think of kind of what would happen in that particular context. And Harlow, of course, was interested in this as well. So he raised a number of monkeys kind of in cages where they could hear and see other monkeys, but they didn't have any form of interaction with monkeys, and certainly didn't have a mother other than the wire mother that potentially gave it contact comfort. Okay. And let's have a look at some of the effects on it. Okay, so there were consequences, and they were actually quite severe consequences. We see two here. The first one is here. It says monkeys reared with wire mothers only were the most dysfunctional. So in other words, I mean, this is something that if you kind of look into Harlow's research, he did a whole host of different conditions, different ways of looking at these baby monkeys. And of course, one of the conditions was that they only had a wire mother. Okay, so it had no other mother, no contact with any other kind of a monkey and things like that. And they end up being quite dysfunctional. But dysfunctional it means that they can't they can't integrate with other monkeys. They don't know how to socialize. They're pretty much kind of quite damaged monkeys. And the second one is that even if they had a soft substitute, so in other words, if they did have contact comfort there, they also didn't have normal social behavior. So pretty much what we can say is if you don't have normal attachment as an infant, you're going to have some problems. Okay, and some of the problems that he kind of saw about was things like that they were more aggressive, okay, less sociable, and bred less. So those are three things that we can say about these particular monkeys that didn't have normal attachment. That's being aggressive, less sociable, and also bred less. Okay, and of course this is in comparison to typical monkeys. Now, so the breeding less was partly due to this idea that they were unskilled at mating. Of course, if you're not sociable, if you don't know how to interact with another monkey, that's kind of where the problem comes. And there's a really kind of both a sad and both interesting film called Mother Love, and there's the link to the full film there where we kind of look at kind of this kind of rocking motion that children have when they kind of read in these particular situations, and relating that to monkeys and things like that. So there really is something quite significant in this, that early childhood attachment is incredibly important to these baby monkeys. Now, this is kind of adding on to this idea of kind of what happens to these monkeys that were bred in a particular way. Now, of course, they were unskilled, so they had no interest in sex with other monkeys or anyone in that particular matter. And so he developed something, and I'm afraid he actually called it the rape rack, in order to impregnate these monkeys. So he got these monkeys impregnated. So this is quite an interesting kind of idea. So testing this idea, okay, so they might not be skilled, they might not be able to interact with other monkeys, but surely once they have a baby of their own, some of that instinct might kind of kick in, okay? And that's kind of what he wanted to test, of course. And so he got these deprived monkeys to become mothers, but we see, unfortunately, those monkeys go on to neglect their young. Sometimes they attacked their young and possibly even killed some of them. Okay, so this has kind of very serious consequences in terms of social kind of interaction, kind of where we are going with kind of saying that if you come from a deprived kind of circumstance, you're kind of more inclined to have these same kind of deprived ideas as well. So we can see kind of Harlow's really telling us quite a lot about kind of early childhood attachment. The last thing that we need to know about kind of Harlow's work is that he also uses and kind of refers to the critical period for these babies. He actually kind of tested kind of like literally down to hours and days as to how easy or quick it is to kind of form an attachment, and he concludes that there is a critical period for developing normal attachment behavior. So in other words, if we want the baby monkey to be normal and have normal attachment, we kind of can't deprive this baby of kind of maternal care. And he kind of worked it out. I think he works it out to be 90 days. And so Harlow actually becomes quite well known for his research. He actually goes on to become the president of the American Psychological Association because he takes a very scientific approach to this, and he's kind of trying to find the nature of love, trying to find the nature of kind of what mother love actually really is, and he kind of feels that he kind of answers quite a lot of questions on this. And so we do find that there's a lot we can use in terms of this. There's obviously the concept comfort. There's this idea that if you don't have attachment, that you kind of have problems, and then also that as a mother, potentially you have difficulty in raising your own children, and so that we now have this understanding that there's a time frame in which attachment should and could be formed for infants. Okay, so there's the concept, quite a lot there, perhaps more than you would need for any particular exam, but it is quite interesting for us, and we certainly can use some of this content in other sections of the course when we start looking at kind of the future kind of impact of attachment relationships. We can turn back to Harlow and talk about this in that particular time. Now, the thing that is also kind of the last thing we need to kind of say is this idea of attachment was impossible and the damage was done. And we'll see later that Bowlby really picks up this type of idea of the critical period, saying, look, there's this fixed time that if you don't form attachment, it's impossible to form attachment after that. Okay, so now we move on to the evaluation of Harlow, and of course we are going to have both positives and negatives, and certainly we can start with in saying that actually Harlow's findings have genuinely helped us understand human mother-infant interactions, and so therefore we can say that that's a real positive here. So we do have this concept that that because of what Harlow has told us, we're able to have a better understanding of a kind of contact comfort being important to children. He also showed us that early attachment relationships are actually better and good for us in terms of social interactions, and we find that it's important to have this understanding that it's his research that helps us kind of see how rearing children ends up being quite important for us to have that early childhood attachment relationship kind of moving into kind of how kind of humans need to kind of learn how to be attached to their children, and how those children can have attachment kind of behaviors related to their early childhood attachment. So it's not the most kind of scientific or kind of peak paragraph evaluation point, but it does definitely we need to kind of focus on the positive that Harlow has given us. And if we wanted something a bit more specific to talk about in terms of, well, what is the practical context of what Harlow is telling us? And we see how here says that social workers now understand child neglect a lot more kind of easily, and kind of how they used Harlow's kind of research to help see certain classic behaviors of children who've either been neglected or abused. And so therefore we can intervene a lot earlier. We also find that Harlow's research has been used very practically for captive monkeys. Certainly if you've ever been to kind of Colchester Zoo, you kind of see how they are trying to always kind of change kind of the places where the monkeys are, and kind of what they do with that. So we certainly do know that in zoos and breeding programs and stuff like that, they looked at Harlow's research and kind of certainly it has helped them. And if you're ever down near Bournemouth Way and an excuse to kind of go visit Bournemouth University, there's a wonderful place there called Monkey World, in which they're kind of taken on a lot of this idea of kind of raising and protecting and kind of caring for monkeys in a very positive way. So we do regard his research as giving us some kind of practical insight to both human behavior and animal behavior in this regard. However, we can't ignore some of the most obvious things and that of Harlow's research, and that is the ethical implications of his research. I mean, I'm always astounded as to how many monkeys he actually worked with, and we see kind of in those videos he's talking about monkey 106 or something like that. It's just, you know, again and again and again, kind of all these different things. We also say he kind of was aware of the suffering that he had in terms of his own procedures, and so we have this concern that like he was calling his mothers, he was calling them Iron Maidens, which were the kind of a torture device of the kind of middle age, but he was kind of doing it with an animal that he thought was similar enough to humans, for us to get kind of worthy data, and yet he still kind of was able to kind of make them suffer, which means that these monkeys must have suffered in some level. We do know that following Harlow and kind of other forms of research, that type of research is not possible now. We don't get to do it anymore. And you have to have licenses to work with animals and things like that. But of course, that's a criticism of Harlow, and he said that, as I said, that he called them the Iron Maiden, so he kind of knew that they were bad. But we can counter the research, kind of the question of the ethics of the research, to say that actually what we now know is possibly more important or sufficiently important. So whenever we look at ethics, we got to consider, does the means justify the ends, and is it that we have some kind of understanding of kind of human attachment behavior now, because of Harlow. And perhaps the biggest concern would be is that if I did research like Harlow did now, then that would be wrong, because we already know the information that we have, and I wouldn't discover anything new. So that's obviously kind of a couple of points that you can use for the criticisms. Certainly think about the ethics and stuff like that. What we find is we do have literally kind of a very similar question to Lorenz in terms of discuss one limitation of using animals to study attachment, and certainly we can use Harlow for that. And this is possibly for you to come back to at a later stage. We also kind of say that as an extra, there is a question that looks like this. It says, outline and evaluate research into the effects of failure to form attachment. Now, I would definitely tell you, and I want to go on record to say that this is not about Harlow. This is about other aspects. Bowlby's maternal deprivation, potentially. We have kind of other things that we're going to write about. However, we could also include Harlow as part of our understanding of the outline of the effects of failure to form attachment. We can see from the baby monkeys kind of that they're antisocial, that they perhaps harm their children and things like that. So we can refer to Harlow in this particular essay. It's not the main part of the essay, but we certainly can use it. And certainly some of the questions about evaluating research, we can perhaps focus on the kind of the positive of understanding kind of how we would change kind of social work behavior because of Harlow's research, and therefore be able to understand failure to form attachment in that particular context. Now, I really hope that you've enjoyed this video, and I will come back with kind of further content, and we will kind of work through the attachment as it is. I hope you're well. Take care, and bye.